Hi, my name is Marav Richter, and welcome to the Richter Scale, where we look at books that have made an impact on me and on the world, and will probably make a huge impact on you too. And today we're looking at the book Atomic Habits by James Clear. It says here, tiny changes, remarkable results. An easy and proven way to build good habits and break bad ones. You know, even the promise of the title, I already love it. I already have an impact because we all know we need to make good habits. But here's acknowledging that as easy as making good habits may seem, it's actually the process of breaking the bad habits that we actually have to get into the atomic, the minuscule, the microscopic little changes that will make an impact. Let me ask you this. How many times have you made a New Year's resolution, right? January 1st, or that clock is ticking down and midnight of December 31st comes in and you say, that's it. This is the year. I'm going to write my book, go to the gym, lose that weight, get in the best shape of my life, finish that degree, play tennis, whatever it is that you want to do. And yet, how many times do you go in January 1st with the best of intentions? You join a gym, you start going regularly, you commit to exercising twice a day, with a personal trainer, one time doing weights, one time doing cardio, you go out for movement, you're gung-ho. And by January 18th, you've got an injury or your muscles ache. And you give up that one time at the gym, and you give up that one walk in the evening. And by January 19th, you start to feel guilty, but you don't want to look at it. By January 30th, the gym is a long gone memory. And you pay it as like your penance, your charitable contribution for the next few months before you realize this is not going to happen yet another year where the goal was set and wasn't met. That's because we have this human need to look at the outcome and run towards it, want to tackle that. And we want huge changes, drastic changes, when really, just like James Clear brought in with this book, it's actually tiny changes, 2% changes, 1% changes, atomic changes, atomic habits that make the remarkable results. I'll give you an example. For me, I absolutely love bread. I mean, one year for Valentine's Day, I sent my husband a little note that said, tulips are blue, roses are red, carbs are my passion, buy me some bread. And he actually went to the bakery and had them make a heart-shaped loaf because I just love bread. And yet every year I make this commitment that I'm going to stop eating bread, or that I'm going to reduce bread, or that I'm only going to have one kind of bread, the healthy kind of bread. And it is so ingrained in my habits to eat bread. I come from a Mediterranean background. Bread is at every meal. I mean, we can't think of eggs without a side of bread. I mean, sunny side up, you have to dip your bread into something. Bread warm out of the oven, a nice focaccia, melted butter, or a little olive oil. I mean, these are things that speak to me. And yet I know that there are consequences to eating that many carbs and that much bread. But so now let's look at that bread example as we go through the atomic habits. One of the first things I love here is James Clear actually gives a nod to B.F. Skinner with this stimulus, response, reward, and then more popularized in more recent culture is cue, routine, reward from The Power of Habit, the book. So James Clear is giving a nod to the people who have come before him. For me personally, B.F. Skinner is a wonderful example of someone who came in a little before his time. He championed this thing called behavioralism, and the whole notion of giving that there's a stimulus, that we all have a stimulus, and how we create our habits toward it is our response. And something about that becomes a reward. So for me with bread, the stimulus is bread. The response to it is not just the sustenance of bread, it's family time, it's that sensory experience, it's, this habituation, it's a reward of familiarity, of sustenance, of flavors, of something that, it's not just about the bread. If it were a stale old piece of Wonder Bread, that doesn't speak to me. It's the whole cultural experience for me. That's the response to that stimulus that is bread. And the reward for me is a feeling of belonging, a feeling of family, a feeling of comfort. The senses, the smells, just talking about it is making me crave bread, which is exactly what this Atomic Habits, which is what we're actually looking at with this book, is the idea of making tiny changes. So now what if I can take the outcome of bread, and that's actually what he talks about here, is that there are 3 layers of behavioral change. And most of us are looking for a different outcome. So when we join that gym, we're thinking, well, we're going to get in great shape. We're going to be in the best shape of our lives. And that's the outcome that we want. So the first layer of actually creating atomic habit change, so real behavioral change, is actually changing the outcome. So he says, it's not just the result, like the losing weight, the publishing a book, winning a championship. It's most of the goals that we set are set at that level. And then the second layer is changing the process. So this is the habit system. So implementing a new routine or decluttering your desk or developing a meditation practice of some sort. Those are the habits that are associated with this level. Most of us drop off at the process level because we're gunning for an outcome, and because that's the first layer that we want, we try to attach new processes, and the processes is where we fall off. He says here, the third and the deepest layer actually is changing your identity. This is the level concerned with changing your beliefs, your worldview, which is a lot harder to change than just your outcome or your processes. Most of our beliefs, our assumptions, and our biases are held at that level. They're associated at that level, the level of identity. So outcomes are what you get. Processes are about what you do, but identity is actually what you believe. Your identity is actually who you are. You're just a compilation of all of your beliefs. That becomes your identity. So he says when it comes to building habits that last, you actually have to have a series of 1% improvements. And the problem is that we're often looking to have a much higher than a 1% improvement. And then we have this level of better or worse. We don't accept a new identity because we're not better than we were yesterday. We're looking for an 80% improvement or 100% improvement. And if we don't get that, we think, well, I was better off yesterday. Whereas 1% improvements is where we're actually creating a new direction for the change. So he says most people begin the process of changing their habits by focusing on what they want to achieve. And that leads to outcome-based habits. The alternative is to build identity-based habits. So with that approach, you begin with who we wish to be. So for instance, in my bread example, the incremental change, the 1% change that I'd like to instill in my life is that all that familiarity, that sensorial, that sense of luxury or family or comfort that I get with the thought notion of bread being at every meal. What if at every 1%, what if at every meal I incorporated something else? A 1% change, whether it be artichoke hearts or olives or celery or carrots. I mean, it doesn't really matter, but what if I associated that belief of what bread brings me with a completely new, not a completely new diet, but a completely new vision for who I believe to be, who I believe to be in association with bread or carbs or my identity, my longing for that identity of someone who is very comfortable and familiar and likes the luxuries of life that previously I thought were associated with bread or carbs. What if I bring that to a new identity of who I am? And what if I associate that the outcome of who I want to be actually now becomes irrespective of whether it's through bread or not, or for you through the gym or not, or whether it is that you want to write a book or not? What if the 1% change that you make actually happens at every single meal, or at every single movement, at every single word that you write? What if these are just the 1% changes? What if that becomes the new goal? The new goal coming from identity-based habits. So he says, imagine two people resisting a cigarette. When offered a smoke, the first person says, "No thanks, I'm trying to quit." Meaning, I identify as a smoker who is resisting a cigarette. It sounds like a reasonable response, James Clear says, but this person still believes that they are a smoker who's trying to be someone else. They are hoping that this new behavior will change while carrying on the same beliefs, the same identity of who they are, being a smoker. The second person says, "No thanks, I'm not a smoker. I don't identify as a smoker. I don't identify as someone who would entertain myself in that way." It's a small difference, he says, but that statement makes a shift in identity. Now, does that mean that it works every time? Possibly, possibly not. That second person saying, "No, I'm not a smoker," they may not have 100% success. But if they continue to say this identity of "I am not a smoker" each and every time they're offered a cigarette, those 1% incremental changes eventually will bring it to the fact that they have spent more time being a non-smoker than being a smoker. The person no longer identifies as someone who smokes. Now, you could change that to outcome. I want to be skinny. I want to be a novelist. I want to be a surfer. The list goes on. The possibilities are endless. But it's that 1% change that makes huge impact. There's one more thing that really impacted me from this book, and I wanted to share that with you. Now, here's one story that I just feel makes the most impact of this. It talks about talent and why your genes don't matter, or when they don't. And this is an element that I love. And I feel like if there's one takeaway, a single thing that has impact on the Richter scale, it's this. So he talks about that most people are familiar with the athlete, Michael Phelps. I'm sure you are. He's considered one of the greatest athletes in history. Phelps has won more Olympic medals, not only as any other swimmer, but more than any Olympian in any sport. Now, as likely as it is that you have heard of Michael Phelps, you may not have heard of another famous Olympian called Hicham El Guerrouj. Now, if I'm mispronouncing that, please forgive me and let me know in the chat or in the comments below, how exactly would you pronounce that differently? But he was a fantastic athlete in his own right. El Guerrouj is a Moroccan runner who holds 2 Olympic medals and is one of the greatest middle distance runners of all time. For many years, he held the record in the mile, the 1500 meter, the 2000 meter races, And at the Olympic Games in Athens, Greece in 2004, he won gold in the 1,500 meter and the 5,000 meter race. These two athletes are wildly different in many ways. Well, for starters, one competes on land and one competes in water, but besides that, they're significantly different in height. El Garouge is just 5 feet 9 inches tall. Phelps is 6 feet 4 inches tall. Despite this 7-inch difference in height, the two men are identical in one respect. Michael Phelps and Hicham El Garouge wear the same length of inseam in their pants. So Michael Phelps has a much longer torso and relative to his height, whereas both men have the same length of legs. Now, that predisposes Michael Phelps to have a much stronger swimming body, whereas with El Garouge, if he had that long of a torso, it would mean that he would have a different center of gravity as he's running. But nonetheless, these examples actually bring forward that light, drive home the message that it's actually not genetics. It's actually being genetically predisposed to the actual environment, which makes you shine, which makes you have the ability to play a stronger game in your specific category or your specific niche. And this brings us to something called habit stacking. So James Clear gives a lot of examples in his own life about where he actually excelled, where he chose to actually take something that he already had a genetic or talent predisposition towards and stack that with some of the things that would allow him to expand his area of expertise in other ways. So it really says, when you can't win by being better, you can win by being different. By combining your skills, you reduce your level of competition, which makes it easier to stand out. You can shortcut the need for a genetic advantage or years of practice by rewriting the rules. A good player works hard to win the game everyone else is playing, but a great player creates a new game that favors their strengths and avoids their weaknesses. And that, my friends, is the biggest Richter Scale moment of impact in that whole book. Go change the game. Go change the game and rewrite the rules for where you have the greatest advantage in your own life. I hope that makes an impact on you. Atomic Habits by James Clear on today's Richter Report. Until next time,